The challenge is real, and I'm not putting out there that it's easy. It's work every single day for the rest of your life.
So welcome to season 2 of Finding Your Range podcast with me, Jeannie. I'm your host, and I'm really delighted to be back for another season of podcasts that look into hypermobility, EDS, and chronic pain. And I'm really thrilled. What a great way to start our season is to be joined by Lara Bloom, who is the president and CEO of the EDS Society. So huge thank you to Lara for joining us today. Now, most of the audience, because most of our audience are obviously EDS, hypermobile community members and doctors, but some of you may not know who Lara is. So I'm going to read you her bio and then we'll get chatting to her. So Lara is the president and CEO of the EDS Society and responsible for globally raising awareness of rare, chronic and invisible diseases, specializing in the Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, excuse me, hypermobility spectrum disorders, which is HSD, and related conditions. Lara manages coordinated medical collaboration, raising funds for research, and focusing on the global progression of EDS and HSD. She speaks at conferences all over the world, lecturing to medical students and professionals, and supports specialists in the field by offering her experience as a leading patient expert. Commemorating 10 years in the field of patient advocacy, Lara was officially appointed a professor of practice in patient engagement and global collaboration at Penn State College of Medicine, USA, on March 11th, 2020. That's awesome. Thank you, Lara. That's amazing.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Not a problem. Our pleasure. So I'm going to get started with our questions. So we've got quite a few, and a few of my Zebra Club members also sent in some questions.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so they're all excited to be hearing from you. So before we get started in what you do now, could you share a little bit about your own personal journey to get your EDS diagnosis?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 41 now, and I was diagnosed back in 2004 when I was 24 years old. So it feels like yesterday and a million years ago all at once. Yeah. And I was symptomatic. I had the usual diagnostic odyssey that so many in the community feel and face. And that was struggling to get a diagnosis, struggling to be believed, having lots of pain and symptoms and not knowing what was causing any of it. Yeah. A lot of it was attributed to growing up, hormones, being accident prone, being a hypochondriac, maybe having anxiety or depression, and feeling like, you know, so many of those things just didn't align with what I thought were causing the problems. And I remember being symptomatic from definitely the age of 11 onwards, but my parents remember odd things happening from earlier on. So really it's been there for most of my life. Yeah. And my sister as well has had a lot of medical issues as well, and was diagnosed after I was diagnosed, but she also had lots of misdiagnoses and bad issues with, mainly for her kind of bladder and bowel, and all of those things haven't actually come into the light until very recently. So even back then, we didn't realize just how much of our medical histories were attributed potentially to the diagnosis. Yeah. And I've really faced certainly the trifecta and more of what most people living with hypermobile EDS have. Although I'm a little bit of an unusual case in that I don't meet the 2017 criteria, mainly because I don't have the skin involvement, and a lot of my wrists have been fused. So a lot of the signs to measure hypermobility are now hard to do. But also I have unusual internal tissue fragility. I have a prolapsed liver. I've got unexplained enlarged arteries. I've lots of things that aren't typical with hypermobile EDS. Yeah. And so although I was diagnosed with hypermobile EDS when I was 24, and have a lot, I have POTS, I have the GI issues, I have found mast cells on biopsies and display some of those things, although I haven't sought out a diagnosis of anything formally with the mast cells. I mainly focus on treating the symptoms. So it's less important for me at this stage in my life to kind of have diagnoses for each issue, although I know retrospectively how important a diagnosis can be in getting that management and care when you don't have anything. So it's, I understand the pros and cons for both, but I think as I've got older, they've kind of said it's probably a type with the mutation yet unknown, which I think is something that some certainly face. That's still uncertainty. Yes. But as I said, I don't really mind what it is. I just really need to focus on managing the symptoms and keeping on top of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And your sort of journey to, I remember listening to your story, and you were kind of searching, and how you ended up doing what you do now is really interesting, isn't it? Because you went to a meeting and then you met somebody, and that's really, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I think it's the true definition of serendipity and being in the right place at the right time, and also kind of giving into the universe. I'm a big fan of the law of attraction, and I practice it daily, and it really, when I'm on it and practicing it, I feel the difference so much emotionally, mentally and physically. So I've always had that, what's meant will be, what you put out, you get back, you are what you think, and all of those things. So rewind back to being 25, 26. I'd received my diagnosis a few years before, and I'd kind of just been, okay, cool, that's what I've got, put it away. And I was working at Getty Images at the time as a photographer, and I was in a relationship, and I was just, at a place where it's like all good. And then suddenly I got an unexplained infection in my liver, of all places. And I was in hospital for a long time, and the infection just threw everything. And I wasn't able to stand up without my heart going at 1,000,000 miles an hour and my blood pressure dropping. And I'd never really experienced that before knowingly, although I had felt the symptoms. Now I know, again, in retrospect, what it gives you. I had a period of a few years where I would have what I called my funnies, where I would suddenly just, I'd feel hot saliva in my mouth. I'd be sick immediately, and I would have to lay down, and I would feel really dizzy. And I just called it my funnies. Again, now I know that was all my autonomic system being up in the air. But this hit me in a way where it was unmanageable. I wasn't able to be discharged from hospital. And of course, the first place they went was, you've got anxiety about going home. And I said, believe me, the only anxiety I have about is staying here. I can't control my blood pressure dropping and my heart rate raising in a way that's clearly showing on your machines. And I was actually under a cardiologist at the time that just didn't know what this could be. And in my mind, he seemed quite dismissive. And I have to say, it's just such a lovely story of how a medical professional can learn and educate themselves. And that cardiologist, who at that time I was his only EDS patient, now lectures at our conferences sometimes, and has taught himself and realized how much he knew about POTS and autonomic issues. And I still see him to this day. And so I just think, sometimes sidetracking, but stick with those doctors that at first don't get it and realize that anyone can become an expert in these conditions and care for you. So that's a side note. But so I was in this position where I was really not doing well. I was discharged eventually, and then readmitted to St. Mary's, diagnosed with POTS. And it took about 1.5 years to level out my symptoms so that I know to use a wheelchair. I mean, it was really bad, very, very bad, very symptomatic. And of course, a lot of deconditioning happened, and it's that vicious circle that we all know that can happen with deconditioning, and how everything then gets worse, but you just can't get to that place where you can start rebuilding. So I was there, I was in it. And I started to do some research and think, I just want to speak to people about this and meet other people that live with it and speak to doctors. other than the few that I have been able to speak to. And I was under Professor Rodney Graham at the time. And I went to a conference in America that was run by EDNF, which was the Ehlers-Danlos National Foundation. And I walked into the room and saw the full spectrum in front of me, every type, within every type, every eventuality that could be, and I was equally petrified as I was inspired, and felt like I had come home in some way.
Yeah.
And it was the most incredible, validating few days. And I just was like, wow, I had to travel to Texas to do that. I wish there was something like that here.
Yeah.
And when I got back, I reached out to Professor Graham and I said, I just did this amazing thing. He was like, there's a support group in the UK. Just go on Google. And I think page 5 or 6, it came up, the EDS support group, run out of a little church hall in Aldershot. And I reached out to them, and something I don't actually mention often in this story is that they said they had an upcoming one-day conference. And I remember going with my parents, and we were maybe one of 5 people in this freezing cold church.
Oh.
And I obviously then had the conference to compare it to, and I was just like, no, this is not giving me what I just got. And it was through no lack of trying. The people were so dedicated and had EDS themselves, but there wasn't the funding, which we all know is what, the key ingredient to make these things work.
Yes.
And so I kind of went away, and I was thinking about ways I could help. I was thinking about raising money and what I could do for them. And at the same time, I was invited to a gallery event at Getty Images, where I had previously worked. I had taken some time out, and I was thinking about changing my career to do something that would work better with the body that I had. Standing in photo shoots and lifting photographic equipment is not the best friend of EDS. So I went to this gallery event, and one of my friend's husband's friend was there. So it was completely unconnected, and we ended up talking, and he said, you used to work here as well, didn't you? And I said, yes. He said, how come you've left? And I said, it's long and boring health condition that I'm sure you've never heard of. And he said, try me. And I said, I've got EDS. And his face was like, my daughter died of that when she was 19. She had vascular EDS. And that was it. It was like the universe just brought us together. We couldn't stop talking. And he said, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I'm a wealthy man, and I've been looking to make a substantial donation to the organization, but I don't really know what they would do with it. And I said, it's funny you say that. I met them, just recently, where I went to one of their conferences, and I was a little bit uninspired, especially after experiencing what I just had. And I'd love to do something, because I think it's no lack of want, it's just funding. Yeah. And he said, why don't we meet them together? Do me a favor, after experiencing what you just did and being a patient that's living with this, write down everything you would want for them to do as an organization in the UK. And that's what I did. And I wrote down everything that you can think of, from make hoodies to conferences to having a Facebook page. They didn't have a Facebook page back then. And, create ways for people to connect, and all of these things that I thought, what would have helped me when I was starting out, and what would help me now? So it was quite an easy list to put together, to be honest. And we went together, and in the tiny little room, and it was the 3 of us. And in my usual over-the-top way with my hands, I was like, and you should do this, and you should do this. I can help by putting on an event, and we really want to help support this, and blah blah blah. And at the end, the gentleman that was with me, he said, I've decided what I want to do with my money. I know you're about to start a second degree, so that's what I had decided in the interim to do. It was a 4-year course in international relations and global politics, and I was looking for a part-time job to do in between. And he said, I'll pay you for the length of your degree to do what you said on that piece of paper. And if at the end of it, you don't want to do this, then you can walk away and know you've done everything you could in that period, and hopefully got it to a point where someone can take over. Yeah. And in my head, I was like, what? I've never run a charity. I want to be a spy. I've gone in and studied politics, and that's what I want to do. And it was just very overwhelming. But I thought, that old cliche, if not me, then who? I'm passionate. I know what's needed to do. I've managed to get someone that's willing to donate the money, and I've got the time. And there began my new life and my new career. And it was very addictive to do things that helped people. And And when I was in it, I realized how much there was that needed to be done and how satisfying it was to be part of making that difference, and realizing I could be ambitious and have a successful career and not compromise what I wanted to get out of my life professionally, but also be able to do some good. And that was 11 years ago. And if you would have told me 11 years ago, you'll be a professor, you'll be running a global organization, so much, there'll be a registry, there'll be, $1 million funded into research and all these things that have happened. It's phenomenal. And really only in the past 5 years since we've launched the society and really put into place that global collaboration and fostering that networking, that it's all just suddenly coming together beautifully. And it's just such an honor and privilege to be part of it every day.
Absolutely. You're such an inspiration, and we thank the universe that you were brought together and it panned out like that, because
thank you.
I just want to say, you mentioned when you went to your first conference in America and you walked into that room and you saw all the spectrum. And I just want to thank you, because when I came to Las Vegas for the first time in 2017 and walked into that room, I was, like you say, it was like, wow, I've come home.
Yeah.
Everyone understands me. Nobody's judging me. I feel at home. And I've said this before, it changed my life. It literally changed my life that day. So huge thank you to you and everything you do. And it brings me on to, like you say, the past 5 years, really, since you formed the EDS Society. I mean, and you mentioned some of them, the things that you've achieved under that relatively short period of time. It's just phenomenal. I mean, I can't believe it. I look at it, I'm like, this is just, honestly, it's just amazing. So, and I've kind of put this into two camps. I've got the patient side and the professional side, because obviously you're dealing with both. So absolutely. Let's start with the patients. If you could pick, and I've been a bit mean because I've narrowed it down to 3 and you've done loads of things, but if you could pick 3 patient-orientated things that you've introduced that you're most proud of and sort of improving patient outcomes and experiences, what 3 things do you think you would say have been the most impactful?
Oh, okay. So I think that, and firstly, I'll say that a lot of people are very generous with their praise and their thanks for what I've done. And, don't get me wrong, I've worked damn hard and it's been wonderful, but my goodness, does it take a village? And I think so much of the success around the society is how everyone has gone all in, every professional, every staff member, every volunteer. And we've created something that people want to be part of. And that's the most wonderful thing about it. And how quickly it's come together. And I think in terms of patients, creating that community where we have gone from not having an Instagram page, not having, I think maybe having 4,000 Twitter followers, if that, I think maybe even 1,000, having a very small Facebook page and it being all US centric, all of those things, because of course we relaunched out of what was EDNF that had also done incredible things within the US, and suddenly making that touching across 40 plus countries, hundreds of thousands of people in a short space of time. When you see the amount of people that attend our events, when you hear from people that are like, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to attend this conference virtually, to join virtual support group calls, to be part of the forums on Inspire. That is an amazing feeling, because as you felt many years ago, very low, what that will mean for people. And I think in some ways I'm grateful for the pandemic, because I remember very clearly in February 2020, we had our staff retreat just before everything really hit the fan. And we sat there and we were like, we really want to take us to a hybrid level, and we want to be reaching as many people as we can. And we were talking about having watch party viewings and really encouraging our affiliates to come together and really bringing together people all over the world, virtually, in smaller groups, in bigger groups. And it was our 5-year plan to get to that. And suddenly the world caught on fire. And that's another thing I'm incredibly proud of, is our COVID response. And it's down to people like yourselves that just gave it everything to help us to give that to the community, that support virtually, that has allowed us to get into the homes and the minds of lots of people, to make them feel supported, validated, and that they're not alone. And I think that's the thing I'm most proud of, really successfully achieving that in a very, very short space of time, and really leading in so many ways. You know, the translations into often 5 languages per event. And so reaching more and more and more people around the world that had never heard someone speak because they couldn't understand English, you know, things like that. So I would say that part, that community outreach, the way that we've been able to go virtual and global in a very short space of time, would be number 1. I think number 2, the thing is it's hard to separate, because so many things start with the patients and impact the community, the professionals, or start with the professionals and impact the community. But I think the registry definitely not only will help with research, but it makes the community feel like their voice matters, and they can give their information, their medical records, their data, to lead to change. And that's very empowering, and that wasn't there before. And then, of course, that in turn helps the professionals who can use that data to do the research that will then come back and impact the patients' lives. So I would say the registry, although it could probably sit in both. And then I'd say, lastly, you know, looking at the breaking down barriers and that whole effort, and really listening and hearing from the community. Something that I'll always say is, you never get it right all the time, and that's okay as long as you learn from it. And so, for example, when we focused on the 2017 criteria, we weren't involved with creating the outcomes, but we were in charge of messaging that to the community. That was our role. Our role was financing and facilitating the consortium to be able to come together and work on those outcomes. Although many people, for some reason, think it was all me, and I created it all, and you know, did it all to fit my phenotype, of which I don't even meet the criteria, so it's bizarre. But there's that misunderstanding and that misconception of what has actually happened. And I think when you just focus on the research and the progression, and we were like, wow, look what we've done that hasn't been done for 20 years, and we can't wait to tell the world. And this has all been done with the very best intentions that would lead to better care, better diagnosis, better research, better management. And because you know that, you assume everyone will get that. And so when we kind of, for want of a better word, marketed out all the work that the consortium had done, I think we were all quite thrown with how the community reacted in some ways to it. Some very grateful, but others very, very scared. And so we learned from that about how important it is to really think about every outcome of how people can react to it. Think about that messaging more, and not just the science, but really think about what that will mean in real times. And we're learning it every year, the consequences of that. We're reevaluating the criteria now. We did the best that we could at that time, but I'm grateful to say that we've now moved on and we're in an even better place. So I think thinking about that equity and not that equality, that there's different, you know, someone living with EDS or think they have EDS in Africa, where there's, you know, 1 or 2 geneticists that might be able to help them in the whole country, are going to have very different issues to someone living in New York who's struggling to get a diagnosis. And how do we help both? And I'm really proud of those efforts that are going into that. And we're by no means there, but we're working on it. You know, the fact that it's really white women that are shown in presentations, in literature, the publications. What can we do to ensure that that's no longer the case. And we're already making small changes in that. And trying to be more representative of our entire community, because you can only kind of put out what you get in. And so we need to make sure that we're asking for what we need so that we get in and we can put out. So I'd say that's the last part, but there's lots and lots fall under that, but it's been amazing. And the professionals, I think I'm most proud of the consortium, because that started as a real dream. I remember very clearly back in 2015, I was working then with Shane, who was the previous executive director of EDNF, and we co-executive directed for a few years. And I left EDS UK in 2015, and that first year up until May 2016 was all about the groundwork and getting the right people around the table, because we knew with this big dream we had that it was all dependent on who was involved. And if we didn't get the right people invested, it would all be worthless. And we went round, we travelled to Glasgow, I remember, to meet with Professor Malfay was there, with a lot of people that had come around the world for a meeting there. We met with Brad Tinkle, Claire Francomano, you know, all of the people that we knew had to be around the table, Peter Byers. And we said, what is the best thing that we could do to change things? And they all said, and we agreed and almost proposed this as well, that we needed a new criteria and management and care guidelines. It had been 20 years. And so the initial plan was to bring together everyone that was needed from around the world to work on that effort. And we didn't really see past that. We just knew that that's what we needed to do. And so in the end, I think we had 90 people, and we separated into all the comorbidities and into all the types. And we put chairs in place for each group, and we brought patient experts into every group. And they worked together for free, day and night, at all hours of the day, to get it done, and published 18 papers, which is what made up the 2017 criteria, which was so trailblazing in every way, and the most cited and downloaded EDS papers that I think have ever been. And
amazing.
We then said, okay, well, this has been great. Let's keep doing it. And we kind of said to everyone, would you be willing to stay involved with this? Because there's so much that needs to be done. And of course, the next project we took on was the CDEs, the common data elements that we will hope will inform our registry and lead to consistency across the world with data collection. And not only did everyone stay committed, but we now have, I think, close to 200 people in the consortium. And counting. We daily have people applying, and we now have peer review members, so even more when you include them. And it's heartwarming to see how much these health professionals are willing to do, including yourself. You know, there's so many people that are invested in our coalitions, in our groups, in our efforts to do that, and it's just incredible. So I would say that is something, that is the foundation that has allowed all of our work to take place. I think secondly, I'd say our research funding. So again, started with the dream in 2018. I think we gave out $25,000, and we've given out, you know, over $1 million for the past few years, and our targets are $1 million a year. And to go from zero for the community to apply to that, we daily get thanked that we provide that, and then that, you know, leads to the research that's going to change the experiences of the patients. So I would say that is incredibly rewarding. And I would say lastly that the EDS Echo has been incredible, you know, so pioneer. We were the first rare disease Echo. Echo is a tele-mentoring platform that teaches, it's an all teach, all learn concept, which encourages all health professionals, and we have lots of them now from all over the world, to bring their de-identified case studies and learn the best way to manage their patients. And it's been incredible. I mean, more successful than we could ever have hoped for. And we've hit our 1,000 target. So with that, we'll keep growing. And it's the more there's no such thing as an EDS expert. It's a health professional willing to learn how to care for our community. And with that mentality, that's how we've gone out, because any gastrointestinal expert, any neurologist, any rheumatologist, any geneticist, you know, any pediatrician can diagnose and manage these conditions. And if we give them the tools to be able to feel like they have the confidence to do that, it will lead to so many people having people to turn to get those diagnosis, management and care. So it's a win-win all round.
Absolutely. Amazing. I'm a huge fan of EDS Echo. I'm on my second, I've attended one, and then you can do your drop-in sessions. So I just think they're brilliant. So anyone listening who hasn't tried it out, really valuable. You can learn so much. And as Lara said, from people all over the world, lots of different perspectives. It's brilliant. So thank you for that. So I mentioned that a few of my Zebra Club members, which is our online program for people living with hypermobility and EDS, they had a few questions for you. So I'm just going to throw these in. So you mentioned about how you've brought out the translations at the conferences, which is brilliant. So I had a lady living in France, and she wanted to know, are there more plans to unite medical professionals and provide patient support in non-English speaking countries? Because she's finding it difficult to find professionals who are willing to create patient empowerment. So do we have more plans to sort of expand this?
So I think, through the efforts I've mentioned, ECHO is one of them, where we're definitely going to do that. And we're trying to do that as globally as we can. We are launching a new website at the beginning of next year, and the hope is to get to a point where the whole website is translated into at least the kind of 5 European languages, and we hope more would grow.
Okay.
So that resources for sure. And continued community outreach, because that then leads to people educating their doctors and hopefully bringing that all together. So yes, there is. It's more nothing necessarily new, but ongoing efforts in what we're doing that I've already mentioned, and it is changing, but it does. I think it's going to take 5 to 10 years for people to truly feel the work that's happening now, and that's just that sucks in many ways, but it's a reason to be hopeful and optimistic, because people are already. There's so many people now that go, I was diagnosed within a few months because of the work you're doing. Yet the people that took 15 years to get diagnosed are in such, a more negative situation in terms of deconditioning, in terms of the kind of PTSD they've felt from that. Yeah. And for them to improve and get to a point where all of this is helping is going to, of course, take a lot longer. And to reach out and to make it global, to make it equitable, and to make it feel like everyone feels the impact of the changes that are being made. So there's a lot of work to do.
Of course.
You have to be patient, but we're getting there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a process, isn't it? And like you say, if you think how much you've done in 5 years, these things, they take time. They can't happen overnight. And but totally. So reasons for hope, absolutely. And you just mentioned it, actually. One of my ladies in America, she wanted to know what could they do as patients to help raise awareness in their own communities, because she wants to advocate and help it, teach doctors, teach her professionals. What could she do, or what could people do?
So a few things. We have a section on our website called How to Get Involved, and on there is Become a Patient Advocate, and there's lots of links and resources there to help people to advocate, to raise awareness, to be able to spread that information. We have, I think, on that page as well, PowerPoints that people can use to present at local hospitals, clinics, things like that. Yeah. And then that captures all the correct terminology and information, so you don't have to worry about that as much, and it gives you the confidence to be able to do that. Yeah. And I'd also recommend looking into our advocacy echo, which is now it's called the CLE program. It's focused on training the advocates to be able to do that work, kind of building up an army of people that can help raise that awareness. It's very much in demand. We have a long waiting list, but I would definitely recommend getting on the list and looking into that.
Oh, amazing. That's fantastic. So there are so many things, aren't there? Like you said, you had your list.
And just here, I realised I didn't even mention Hedge. which, you know,
yes.
is such a huge thing that we're proud of, which is $2 million going into finding the molecular causes behind hypermobile EDS. Lots of things that,
it's great.
How you can forget something as huge as that, but and that will, of course, make a real impact when we get the finding that.
Fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned it earlier, and you mentioned that you're sort of looking at the criteria again. One of our UK members feels that HSD can be played down by medical professionals. What can we do to help medical professionals understand HSD better, so that it's not sort of a second, you know, the poor relation of EDS kind of thing?
Absolutely. And I think that's going to take time. If you think about it, it's just a few years old.
Yeah.
And the work we're doing at the moment to look at the criteria, HSD, hypermobile EDS, and the pediatric criteria for both will help. As will, you know, research we're doing into the differences between the two. So in January, watch this space. We're going to be making a big announcement as to the details of that criteria review work.
Oh, great.
And efforts we're making to really increase the awareness and the validity behind HSD.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm just going to read you something, because sometimes, you know, we're not aware of the impact of what we do for people on a personal level. So this is from one of our members. And he just wanted to say that, well, thank you to you. And he said he first came across Lara and followed her blog when she was doing the London Marathon. And this was the same time that he was diagnosed with EDS3, as it was called back then. Mm-hmm. He thought his life would be totally turned on its head. But Lara's blog showed me that I can live a life with this issue. So he just wanted to say thank you to you, that even your blog, you know, and you were just, that was, you know, when was the London Marathon? When was that?
2011.
Oh, 2011. So that's a long time ago. So you wrote, so you wrote your blog back then, and that inspired somebody to have hope, which is just amazing. So
to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. So gosh. So, you know, making impacts when, you know, sometimes we don't realize how far reaching our little contributions are. So that's brilliant.
Absolutely.
So, and again, you've told us so many things, but just very quickly, what can you share? Any other plans? What does the future hold for the EDS Society, sort of for next year or the next few years? I know there's probably lots.
There's lots. Well, we're going to be making quite a few announcements at the beginning of next year. We've got more money to be able to give to research. The registry is going to be relaunching in the beginning of next year. We're going to be telling you the details about the criteria review. We are looking into how our events will look going forward to that hybrid model. Mm-hmm. We definitely won't be giving up that virtual component. So, but we are going to going back into in-person as well. We're really focusing on research and education. They're really the two pillars of our mission, and the research being trying to get as many requests for proposals out there that we can give funding to other external institutions to do that research, build the registry, and educate through ECHO and other means, both the community and the health professional community. So that's really where all of our focus is, and the consequences of that really trickling down to making the community feel supported, validated, and that they feel like, you know, we're really here for them. Other exciting, as I mentioned, the new website launch, that's going to be huge. It's so different. It's, you know, our website's great, but there's too much great information on there. You need like a sat nav to get through. And so the new one is going to be a really amazing experience, that you can find things really well, and it's going to be split into, like how we started this, into the kind of community and then the health professionals. Both and different things, and it's really exciting. It's really we're hoping to increase what we're doing for our kind of kids and teens, youth community. Lots of plans. We're, of course, next summer the Centre of Excellence program is going to be launching. We're launching in the new year a Research for Our Futures campaign, which is basically fundraising for our research and our centres of excellence, those two things that are so pivotal to taking things forward.
Okay.
And yeah, lots of analysis begins for Hedge, so there's going to be announcements. There's lots to be hopeful for, and look forward to.
Fantastic. Thank you. So let's just come back to this. So you've obviously, we all know there's still lots and lots of work to do. You did a tweet recently, and you basically just said, "I believe you." And it was a really powerful tweet, and it got lots of engagement. So there's obviously lots of us out there who are still having those issues. And you mentioned, people sadly are suffering maybe from medical PTSD. And, a lot of us have had a really rough time. What do why did you send that tweet? What do you feel that we still have to do to make our life? Sorry, that's my computer bleeping. What do you feel we have to do to, improve things for our community still?
Yeah, I think I'd put it out because I remember very clearly what it was like to not be believed and how that makes you feel. And I think that there is so much PTSD from that. And, I think it also is damaging in the sense that you're kind of potentially told for so long it's in your head, that when you get diagnosed and you are encouraged to think about your mental health as well as your physical health, there's a defense mechanism there because people are like, but it's not in my head, I don't need mental health support.
Yeah.
Without realizing that it's essential to be able to cope with the physical side of things. It's not saying things are in your head. So it's almost re-educating that point as well. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. People's, health professionals largely, but also community members. I think there's a real, social media can be toxic. I think there's a real I'm worse than you group that are on kind of the Reddit forums and social media, that they seem to think that there's a certain way of living with a chronic condition when there's no right and wrong way. And I think people need to be kind and be mindful that everyone is different. Everyone got to the point where they're at today.
Yeah.
Very different journeys. And some could have had exactly the same journey, but have experienced it in totally different ways. And that judgment makes people, again, not feel believed and not accepted by your own tribe, so to speak. Yeah. And so I think it's very damaging. And then if you think about the health professionals, it's the language, it's the unconscious bias, it's the limited time and funding that they have to be able to try and make a difference. And sometimes you're sitting a 10-15 minute GP appointment and you'll present a list this long and they're just like, what do I do with this? And so they go to the anxiety depression place because it's quickest and easiest and seems to make sense because no one could have that much wrong with them. So I think it's a real, everyone has to take responsibility for this. And it's not victim blaming in the sense of, the patients need to do stuff to help themselves. It's realizing that feeling of not being believed and accepted can come both from within the patient community and the health professional community equally. I remember when I had COVID at the beginning of last year, there was a whole Reddit channel set up on how it was trying to prove that I didn't have it and that I didn't have EDS and that I shouldn't be in the position I'm in. And that's from people living with the condition. It's like, what are you trying to achieve by that? And it triggers that back to like having to feel like you need to convince people that you're ill and that you've got something wrong with you. And I'm grateful to say that's something that I've not really felt like I have to do, but many do, and it's really harmful, really toxic. So I think a lot of work that needs to be done, and it will only be done through collaboration, education and research, and that's what we are doing. Thank
you, Lara. So just stepping away from the EDS Society just briefly, just talking about you, and I think we kind of got a good idea now of what drives you, but, you do work very hard. You're having, late night conference calls in the middle of the night, and when you do your virtual events, you're there all day, long days, and clearly, you've done a lot, you work very hard. So what drives you, first of all, and I think we kind of know, but it's good to hear it again. And how do you manage your condition with such a busy schedule?
So I think firstly, what drives me is the huge amount of work that still needed to be done. And, you know, love me or hate me, and there's people that hate me out there, unfortunately, for what, and I'm glad to say the majority are grateful for what we're doing, but I am relentless in pursuing better quality of life for all those impacted by rare, chronic, and invisible conditions. Because I personally know what it's like to live with one, but professionally, I'm very lucky to be able to do a job where you can make such an impact and be good at it, and to have a vision to be able to see what's needed to be done, and understanding how many people are needed to be able to do it. You know, it's always been from the start, okay, this is what's needed, who needs to be around the table. I cannot steer this ship alone, nor would I want to. And I think that is what drives me to know that there is so much that needs to be done. There are so many good people out there willing to help and do it. How do we do it together? How are we stronger together? And how can we make the biggest impact to as many people as we can? And I've met so many individuals along the way where it's no longer just my story that drives me. It's, you know, X and Y and Z and A and B and D, and all the people that I have met along the way who have tragic stories, uplifting stories, things that people who passed away who I wish I could have done more for, who I see their face every day. And, you know, how much more needs to be done for vets and how frustrating that is. And all of these things, the question of why people still not believed, the simple thing that just seems unthinkable if you think of someone having cancer, you know, although now I know that there's trolling in that community too, where there's that, you know, that comparison, and I always say comparison is the thief of joy. So I think, you know, we just need to all be working together. So that's definitely what drives me, the amount to be done, and knowing that I can make a difference to trying to make, you know, complete some of the things on that list. And how do I cope? Well, I think it's a good question. It's a timely question, because as you mentioned when we were talking just before this podcast started, that I posted just yesterday about how I'm not on top of my symptoms right now. And there's a few different reasons as to why that is. I think that, and this is what I mentioned earlier, that the mental side of things is, for me, 70% of the barrier that I face, because the physical things that I need to do to help myself, which work so well, are almost the easy part. It's overcoming the, you know, so for example, if you break it down, my kind of toolbox is diet, what I eat. I know that if I cut out 70 to 80% of the time carbs, sugar, dairy, and gluten, I feel like $1 million compared to what I feel like right now, with a really swollen gut, like bloated, GI symptoms, sluggish, tired, everything hurts more. The hydration I managed to stay on top of, because if I didn't, I would be so deconditioned I wouldn't be able to work. But movement is the other thing. You know, when I go to the gym pretty much 4 to 6 days a week, and some days I'll just use the treadmill and walk. I row most days. Rowing is I love. It's brilliant for potsy stuff because you're seated. And it's, you know, closed chain, so it doesn't hurt my joints and my tears that I have. And I lift weights. I do very little cardio. The only cardio I do is rowing, and I can control that very easily. And when I do that, my goodness, the difference I feel is astonishing. And waking up in the morning, practicing the law of attraction, the miracle morning, it's called, meditating, gratitude, affirmations, and some reading, you know, intentional. And again, when I spend an hour in the morning doing that, it sets my day up in such a positive way. And I go to bed at night just feeling 100 times better. But for some reason, so, you know, you go out for a meal with friends, you don't want to be the person that's sitting there going, I'm gluten-free, no onions, no garlic. It's annoying, and you want to order the big dessert melting cookie dough, you know, cream. I love food. I love going to eat. I love sushi. I love everything that's bad for me. And, you know, there's only so many days you can be like, oh, I'll just have this one cheat. And then you realize that you've had that one cheat every day. And it's like anything, when you're doing it, it's actually, when I'm eating really well and consistently, I fancy that food much less, and I don't really eat it. But when you're in it and you're eating everything you want to eat, it feels impossible to eat well. I practice intermittent fasting as well, which some people think is great, other people is controversial. Most people do 16-8, which is when you fast for 16 hours, you eat for 8. I actually do, which is 1 meal a day. And that's what helped me. But as I always say, everyone should speak to their doctor and find out what's best for them, because it may not work for you. Supplements, take vitamin C, vitamin D, magnesium. And when I'm doing, I try and sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. My reality is more like 5, 6. But when I get those extra hour or two, I do feel better. And when all of that is in place, I have a very good quality of life, and I really manage well. But since August, the only thing I've done regularly and consistently is take my supplements and hydrate. The movement and the diet have gone out the window, and I feel it. My God, do I feel it? I feel terrible at the moment. So I woke up, it's Monday. I woke up this morning, I did my miracle morning, and I already feel so much more aligned and ready to go. And for me, I always, when I've been at a place deconditioning mentally and physically, I start with the mental first, because you need that to do the physical. So
absolutely,
I'm starting this week focusing on my food. And, you know, I say food rather than diet, because diet is always thought of as losing weight, and I'm certainly not trying to do that. So I'm thinking about what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, and doing my meditation, affirmations, and gratitude. And I know that next Monday, so today, a week, I'll be on a plane flying to the US for the first time.
Oh, wow.
It's almost impossible to eat well and to move, but I'm going to really try and stay on top of it. And then when I get back from that trip, I'm going to hit the movement. So that's my plan. I hope I stick to it. And I know I always can get back to it, but you know, the challenge is real, and I'm not putting out there that it's easy. It's work every single day for the rest of your life. It's like taking a pill, but if only if it was that easy. It's utterly exhausting to be able to stay on top of it, but it's essential.
Yeah, totally agree. Absolutely. And I'm really happy to see movement in there as part of your routine. But yeah, you know, it's a long game, isn't it? There are, as I always say to my clients, there are no quick fixes, unfortunately. We are in it for the long game. And like you say, you're constantly working at it. It's not that we can just say, oh, well, that's it, I'm done. It doesn't work like that. And that's really important, isn't it? That people understand that we're constantly, we're having to look after ourselves. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lara. Just finally, just let us know how people can find out about your work and the EDS Society, upcoming events and everything like that.
Well, if you type Lara Bloom, Lara Bloom, BLOOM, into pretty much any platform except TikTok, I haven't quite got there yet. You could find me. I have a monthly, or at least quarterly blog on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can find out what I'm doing. And then the same with the Ehlers-Danlos Society, www.elers-danlos.com, and then everything you can find from there. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and I think we are about to hit TikTok. I think we're already there.
Oh, I'll look out for that. Yeah. Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much for all your time today and answering all the questions. It's been really, really great, and it's a real pleasure to speak with you today. So thank you for all our listeners for tuning in today. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment box below. And as Lara said, if you want to reach out to her, she's on all the social media platforms, and I'm sure she will get back to you. But thank you all for listening, and keep moving.